All right, we are going to be jumping into the next chapter, chapter 5. And this is one of my favorite chapters because we just get to look at the outdoors. We get to look at different parts of the great outdoors within the United States, but also around the world, and what makes those places work so well. I'm going to start reading on page 126. You can have your notes open, and then you can also have your books open to page 126. During a long hike, you stop at a fallen tree to rest. You soon realize that what seemed like a calm, peaceful spot is actually a busy is actually very busy. Squirrels are chasing each other up and down trees. Birds are frightened by the squirrels and fly to another area. At your feet, you see a long line of ants carrying food. How does this forest meet the needs of all the animals? So as we look, we're going to be looking at how all the needs of the plants and animals in their spot need to be met. We're going to be looking in lesson 1 at what is an ecosystem. Organisms live where they can have their needs met. These needs are met by the living and non-living things around them. Where organisms live. What kind of ecosystem are you in right now? An ecosystem is all the living and non-living things in your area. An ecosystem is any place that living things are found. Your classroom is an ecosystem. Your room that you're working in right now at home is an ecosystem. What are the living and non-living things in your classroom? So right now, there's not a whole lot of living things in the classroom. It's just me. But there's a lot of non-living things in here. There is desks. There is the board. There is computers. There is food. So those are all different things that help make this classroom run smoothly. As we go through our notes today, you're going to be writing the definition of the vocabulary words. And that first one being ecosystem that we went through is all the non-living, living and non-living things in the area. We're going to keep reading in living and non-living parts. Many populations make up the living parts of an ecosystem. A population is a group of organisms that are of one species that live in an area at the same time. So right away, I'm just going to write that down on my notes so that I can have that down. So a group of organisms of one species that live in an area. All right. A population may be all the oak trees or all the red ants in an area. So if you look outside, generally, you're going to find that if you look out, there's usually one type of tree, or if there are multiple, you're going to find a pattern of different trees. Or if you think about different animals, I know just around school, you would find the same type of bird. You'd see ants, you'd see squirrels, but they're all going to fall into the same group. And if I'm looking at a population, I'd be looking at just one organism. So say the squirrels. That's just one organism that live in an area at one time. A community is made up of all the populations in one area. Members of a community depend on each other to fill needs, such as food, shelter, and reproduction. So if you think about around school, those squirrels, the birds, the trees, they all depend on one another to fill each other's needs. The non-living parts of an ecosystem include air, water, soil, temperature, and sunlight. They often determine what kinds of organisms and the number of organisms that can live there. So if there's only so much food, that means that um, there's not going to be a bunch of animals that can live there. There's a limited amount of things there. As in any system, the living and non-living parts of an ecosystem interact in many ways. Each part has a role. In this way, the whole system works to meet the needs of all its parts. In any ecosystem, some organisms survive, others do not. Populations can live and grow only where their needs are met. If a population's needs are not met, the population will get smaller. Some of its members might move away, maybe none will survive. So just looking at our notes, there is parts in these first two sections that we need to fill out. So an ecosystem is any place that living and non-living, or that living things are found. So there always has to be living things in order for it to be an ecosystem, but you're also going to find non-living things around there. Members of a blank depend on each other to fill blank. So members of a community depend on each other to fill needs. The non-living parts of a ecosystem include air, water, soil, temperature, and blank. And that is in this section. So the non-living parts of an ecosystem: air, water, soil, temperature, and sunlight. So that's going to be a huge one as far as helping plants survive, is that sunlight. We're going to go on to the next page talking about biomes. And biomes is going to be a really big part in our chapter. We're going to actually be looking at different biomes as we go on throughout the chapter. Biologists have divided the world into regions called biomes. A biome, and I can get this into my notes right away too. So if you're looking at the biome part of your section, it's going to be that first section. A biome is a large ecosystem with generally the same climate and organisms. A single biome may cover many countries. Together, all the biomes make up the biosphere. So just going into that for our notes, a biome is a large ecosystem with generally the same climate and organisms. And then all the biomes make up the biosphere. We're going to keep reading. When you hear the word rainforest, do you think of a hot jungle on the other side of the world? A rainforest biome is any place that has large amounts of rain and thick plant growth. Did you know that there's a rainforest in the state of Washington? It is a temperate rainforest, which means that it receives a lot of rain during the year, but its temperature can be quite cool. So we're going to be going through the different biomes. So it's just a place with the same climate and organisms. And we're going to be looking through what makes up each biome and what makes it a little bit different than another one. A temperate rainforest community has trees such as maple and spruce. These grow well in the wet, cool climate. Mosses often cover rocks. Elk, cougars, and bears are some of the animals in the area. Squirrels, raccoons, and owls also live in the temperate rainforest. Look at the roles of the trees and squirrels in this ecosystem. Trees help squirrels by giving them food and shelter. Squirrels help trees by spreading seeds. These organisms help each other meet their needs. The squirrels and trees are just two parts of this ecosystem. The whole system works because its parts and organisms interact to meet each other's needs. So even things just as small as a squirrel, we don't think has a big job. Their job is very important because without them, there wouldn't be new plants growing up. So they also have a powerful purpose. We don't have a temperate rainforest anywhere around us. It's the closest one is in Washington, which is on the other side of the country. So that is one that we don't see. Going over to balance in ecosystems. Every organism in an ecosystem has a niche and a habitat. So this is where we're going to see our last two vocabulary words. A niche is the role that an organism has in its ecosystem. So the role or the job. So the niche of a spotted owl, which you can see right up here, a spotted owl is that of a hunter. It eats small animals such as mice and chipmunks. A habitat is the place in which an organism lives. A habitat is made up of the soil, air, and water, as, as well as the plants of the area. The habitats of spotted owls are the trees and the land on which they live. All the relationships among the organisms keep the ecosystem balanced. For instance, the population of spotted owls balances with the populations of small animals, such as mice, that are their food. If the small number of animals drops too low, the owls have less food, so their number will decrease too. With fewer owls hunting, fewer mice will be eaten. As a result, the population of mice will grow. Then, when more mice are around, the number of owls will increase again. In this way, the population of owls and small animals go up and down with a range. So their relationship is really important in there as they go on. Looking at our last notes, we see every organism in a ecosystem has a niche, so they all have a job, and they all have a habitat or a place to do their job and live. The relationship among the organisms keeps the ecosystem balanced. And we're going to see in the rest of our lessons, we'll see how each organism helps the ecosystem stay balanced and how that relationship is going to be really important amongst all the organisms. So as we finish our lesson, you can have out your lesson 1 worksheet. We can go through that. The top part I'm going to have you go on your own because it's just talking about the vocabulary words that we went through, which you have all complete and filled out. The bottom part we can go through. The air, water, temperature, soil, and sunlight in an ecosystem have no effect on organisms that live in an area. I know that in our notes we talked about that. So the non-living parts of an ecosystem include water, air, soil, temperature, and sunlight. It doesn't say whether it affects it, so we can go back in our books. They often determine what kinds of organisms and the numbers of organisms that can live there. So it seems like they have a really important part in the ecosystem, so I'm going to put false because they do have an effect. So that makes it false. Ecosystems are everywhere that living things are found. I see that right away. It, that is absolutely true. That is the very first sentence. All the biomes make up the biosphere. Just going to look up. Oh, and that's the very first thing in our notes. All the biomes make up the biosphere. So that would be true. A single biome may be made up of areas around the world that have the same climate and organisms. Just going into our section on biomes, you can look for that answer. So it says a single biome may cover many countries. So I know that that is true. And then going on to the last part, it says predict how the niche of trees in a temperate forest and the niche of squirrels in the same rainforest interact. So I want you to look at page 129 to help you out with answering that. So it's predicting, so it doesn't tell you the correct answer for sure. It's telling you to make an educated guess on what you think might happen with that. Like I said, we're going to be continuing to look at the different biomes around the world in the rest of our lessons throughout the chapter. So just keep an eye on what's going to make everything balanced, what the job is of each animal or the niche, and then where they live in their different habitats.